For a long time, the galaxy believed Earth was a small and unimportant world. To the great empires spread across the stars, Earth looked like nothing but a quiet planet with no true power. Aliens who visited sometimes found humans strange, but they saw no danger in them. The empires thought of Earth as a place of music, art, and small machines, not a place that could shake the stars. This was the belief for centuries, and no one questioned it. But humans have a history of keeping secrets. While the galaxy looked away, humans built things no one expected. They studied their own wars, their mistakes, and their victories. They learned from every battle they fought among themselves, and instead of showing the galaxy what they had, they kept silent. They pretended to be weak, to be simple, while in secret they prepared for something far greater. One day, whispers began to move from star to star. Merchants told stories of human ships moving farther out from their solar system. Explorers from other species said they saw strange designs hidden in the asteroid belts near Earth. They spoke of ships that were not built for travel, but for destruction. At first, these were only rumors, and the empires laughed them off. But the whispers never stopped. They grew louder each year until even the strongest rulers began to wonder. The turning point came when the Zarth Dominion attacked a human colony at the edge of their space. The Dominion was powerful and cruel. They controlled dozens of star systems and crushed anyone who stood in their way. To them, humans were just another weak species to bully. They thought Earth would do nothing if one of their small colonies was destroyed. But they were wrong. Back on Earth, the order was given. Commander Laura Harris, a woman who had spent her life training for war, was called to lead a mission. She was calm, steady, and carried the weight of Earth's hidden strength on her shoulders. Her voice was strong when she spoke, and she gave orders with quiet confidence. She was chosen because she understood both the fear of weakness and the meaning of power. The time had come to show the galaxy what humanity truly was. The mission was to awaken Earth's most powerful ship, the Battleship Resolute. It had been hidden for years, kept far from the eyes of outsiders. To most humans, it was just a rumor, something spoken of in quiet circles. But to the commanders and engineers who worked on it, the Resolute was real. It was not just a ship. It was a weapon of history, built with the knowledge of every war humans had ever fought. When the Resolute was powered up, the ground trembled. Its engines came alive with a roar that echoed through the stars. The ship was massive, larger than anything most humans had ever seen. Its dark hull glowed with lines of energy, and its weapons shone with deadly promise. Those who saw it for the first time could not speak. They only stared, filled with both fear and pride. The ship was not beautiful in the way of art, but in the way of storms and oceans. It was power made into metal. Commander Harris stepped onto the bridge of the Resolute. Around her, the crew worked with quiet focus. They had been waiting for this day for years. Every man and woman on that ship knew the importance of their mission. They were not just protecting Earth. They were carrying the weight of humanity's future. Daniel Carter, the gunnery officer, checked the weapon systems with steady hands. Marcus Holt, the tactical officer, studied maps of the stars and planned for what was to come. Each of them carried the same determination. This was not just another battle. This was the moment humanity would be seen. As the Resolute lifted from Earth's orbit, people all over the planet watched. Families stood together, children pointed at the sky, and elders whispered prayers. For the first time, the truth could no longer be hidden. Humanity had created something that would change everything. Across the galaxy, sensors picked up the movement of the ship. Alien empires turned their attention to Earth with wide eyes. Some thought it was a joke, a small planet pretending to be strong. Others felt a cold shiver, knowing deep down that this was no trick. The Resolute moved through space like a shadow of war. Its engines burned bright, leaving trails of light behind it. The crew felt the weight of every eye watching them, but they did not waver. They knew what they carried. They knew the galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. The silence of humanity was over. When the Resolute crossed into neutral space, the Zarth Dominion sent a message. Their leaders laughed, mocking the humans. They called them foolish, saying one ship could never face an empire. Their words carried arrogance, the same arrogance that had ruled the galaxy for centuries. But while they laughed, their scanners told a different story. The readings from the Resolute made no sense. The power it carried was far beyond what they understood. Its shields were stronger than the crust of planets. Its weapons could pierce moons, and its core burned like a star itself. The Dominion ships hesitated, but Commander Harris did not. She gave a single order to Daniel Carter. A shot was fired from the rail cannon, moving faster than light. The round tore through the lead Dominion cruiser as if it were made of paper. The ship split apart, its pieces burning as they scattered into the void. The silence that followed was heavier than words. For the first time, the Dominion did not know what to say. They had seen something they could not understand. Back on the Resolute, the crew did not celebrate. They remained calm, focused, and ready for what would come next. They knew this was only the beginning. Commander Harris stood on the bridge, her eyes steady, her voice quiet. She knew that from this moment forward, the galaxy would never forget what it had seen. Humanity had shown its hand. The age of silence was over. The galaxy was about to change forever. As the ship moved deeper into space, the whispers grew louder. Across worlds and empires, people spoke in fear and awe. Some said Earth had awakened giants hidden in the dark. Others believed humanity had been waiting for centuries to strike. In every council chamber, in every throne room, leaders gathered to speak of the human battleship. And in their voices there was one common thread: fear. The Resolute continued on its path, a storm moving through the stars. And though the galaxy watched in horror for the first time, humanity stood unbroken, carrying the power of all their history into the future. The Resolute entered neutral space, and every sensor across the galaxy turned toward it. At first, the empires thought little of a single ship. They saw it as pride or desperation, nothing more. The Zarth Dominion, proud and cruel, broadcasted messages filled with mockery. They called Earth a child playing in the shadows of giants. Their voices rang with laughter, echoing across the stars, but the laughter hit a nervous edge. Their scanners were already whispering truths they could not explain. The Dominion fleet waited ahead, massive in number. Hundreds of warships filled the void, each armed and ready. To them, a single human ship was nothing more than a spark against a storm. But still, their commanders felt uneasy. Reports from their science officers did not add up. The human battleship carried power signatures beyond anything seen before. Some dismissed it as a trick. Others felt their scales tighten with dread. Still, orders were orders, and the Dominion moved to engage. On the bridge of the Resolute, Commander Laura Harris stood tall, her eyes fixed on the stars ahead. Her crew worked in silence, each person steady and calm. Daniel Carter checked the rail cannons again, his fingers moving over the controls with care. Marcus Holt studied the tactical map, marking enemy positions and running predictions. Around them, every officer knew what was at stake. They carried not just weapons, but the weight of humanity's future. The Dominion hailed the Resolute again, this time demanding surrender. They promised mercy if Earth gave up its secrets. Commander Harris did not answer. Her silence was her reply. The Dominion commander grew angry and ordered his fleet to advance. The void trembled as hundreds of ships moved forward. Bright engines lit up space, and the Dominion believed they would soon crush the lone human vessel. Commander Harris gave her first command. Her voice was calm and clear, cutting through the tension. Daniel Carter prepared the weapons, aiming at the lead cruiser. With a single nod from Harris, he fired. The rail round shot out faster than light, striking the cruiser before its crew even realized they were targeted. The massive ship split apart, breaking into burning fragments. Silence followed, heavy and cold. The Dominion fleet froze, their confidence broken in an instant. The Resolute advanced slowly, its engines glowing like a star. Every weapon on its hull was alive, ready to fire again. The Dominion tried to regroup, sending orders through broken voices. Some ships turned to flee while others held position, too afraid to move. Their commanders screamed at them, demanding they fight, but fear spread like fire. They had seen what one shot could do, and they knew more would follow. Marcus Holt leaned over the tactical table. He saw the panic spreading, the weakness in the enemy lines. He spoke quietly to Harris, suggesting maneuvers that would trap the Dominion ships. She listened and nodded. The Resolute moved with precision, sliding between enemy formations as if it had practiced this dance 1,000 times. The Dominion ships tried to surround it, but they only walked into Holt's trap. Their movements became scattered, their strength broken by fear and confusion. The second volley came. Daniel Carter fired again, this time targeting 2 destroyers. The rounds ripped through both, leaving nothing but debris. The Dominion ships behind them tried to scatter, but the Resolute's weapons followed. Lasers cut across space, beams of light that carved through steel. Missiles flew out in silence, locking onto fleeing ships. Within moments, what had been a mighty fleet was reduced to wreckage and smoke. On distant worlds, alien leaders watched in horror, their councils filled with shouts and questions. How had Earth hidden such power? How had one small planet built a ship that could destroy fleets? Panic filled the halls of power. Some demanded immediate war against Earth before they grew stronger. Others whispered that it was already too late. The sight of the Dominion's defeat was more than just a battle. It was a message written in fire. Humanity was not weak. On the Resolute, the crew stayed focused. There were no cheers, no celebrations. They moved from one task to the next with discipline. Each officer knew this was only the beginning. The Dominion was not finished, and the galaxy itself would soon respond. Commander Harris stood calm, her eyes never leaving the battlefield. She knew what she had unleashed, and she carried the weight of it without hesitation. The Dominion sent out distress calls, begging for reinforcements. Dozens of fleets across their empire prepared to move, but their fear grew with every report. Commanders refused to engage without overwhelming numbers. Some even disobeyed orders, retreating deeper into Dominion space. The fear of the Resolute spread faster than light, reaching worlds that had never even heard of Earth. Everywhere, whispers began. Humanity was not what they seemed. Marcus Holt studied the reports coming in, his eyes sharp. He saw the cracks in the Dominion's empire, the weakness in their command. He told Harris they could press further, breaking the Dominion apart piece by piece. She listened but remained steady. Her mission was not destruction alone. It was to show the galaxy what Earth could do. She wanted the message to be clear. Humanity desired peace, but they would not be mocked or broken again. As the Resolute pressed deeper into neutral space, more fleets gathered to stop them. But each time the story was the same. The Dominion charged with numbers and the Resolute cut them down with power. Ships fell apart, fleets dissolved, and commanders begged for retreat. Every battle was a lesson the galaxy would never forget. Humanity had been silent for centuries, but now their voice was loud, carried by fire and steel. In the aftermath of each clash, Harris sent a single message to surviving ships. It was simple, spoken in a calm voice. Earth did not seek endless war. Earth did not seek conquest. But if attacked, Earth would respond with power beyond imagination. Those words spread across the stars, repeated in fear and respect. Some believed them, others doubted, but none could ignore them. On distant council worlds, debates raged through the night. Some empires wanted to unite against Earth. Others wanted to stay out of the conflict, afraid of sharing the Dominion's fate. A few even whispered of alliances with humans, hoping to stand beside power instead of against it. The galaxy was changing, and every leader felt the weight of that change pressing down on them. The Dominion, humiliated and desperate, began to prepare their largest fleets. They called on old allies, promising rewards for their support. They told their people Earth was a threat to all life, a danger that must be destroyed. But even as they shouted their threats, their voices carried doubt. They had seen the truth with their own eyes, and they could not erase it. Back on the Resolute, Commander Harris stood at the viewing window. She looked out at the stars, knowing the battles ahead would be even harder. Yet her voice stayed calm when she spoke to her crew. She reminded them why they were there. They were not fighting for conquest. They were fighting for survival, for respect, for a place among the stars. And her crew listened, their hearts steady, their resolve unbroken. The Resolute continued its journey, cutting through space with power unmatched. Behind it lay the ruins of fleets and the whispers of fear. Ahead of it lay the unknown, filled with enemies and challenges. But the ship moved forward without hesitation. For the first time in history, humanity was no longer silent. The galaxy now knew their name, and it carried both fear and awe. The Dominion had learned the first lesson, and soon the rest of the galaxy would follow. The galaxy shook after the first battles of the Resolute. Word spread quickly, faster than light, carried by frightened survivors and intercepted transmissions. In the chambers of power across alien empires, fear grew like a shadow. The Eldari Ascendancy, the oldest and wisest of the galactic powers, called an emergency meeting. Their council hall, a massive dome lit by glowing crystals, was filled with ambassadors from dozens of empires. Voices rose in anger, in panic, in disbelief. How could Earth, a small planet ignored for centuries, hold such power? How had they built a battleship that could tear apart fleets that had ruled the stars for ages? Some called the rumors lies. They said the Dominion exaggerated their loss to excuse their failure, but as more reports arrived, the truth became clear. The Dominion's fleets had been crushed by a single human ship. No one could deny it anymore. The galaxy had to face the truth. Humanity was not weak. They had been hiding their strength, waiting for the moment to reveal it. In one corner of the council hall, a voice rose louder than the others. It belonged to an ambassador from a smaller empire, the Thalos Union. Their people had lived under Dominion control for centuries, forced to pay tribute and obey orders. Now the ambassador spoke with fire in his voice. He said humanity's victory gave hope to the oppressed. If Earth could stand against the Dominion, maybe others could too. His words spread unease. Some nodded in agreement while others shouted him down, afraid of what rebellion would bring. The Eldari leader, tall and robed in silver, lifted his hand for silence. His voice was calm but carried great weight. He said humanity's strength was real, and the galaxy must decide how to face it. Would they unite to destroy Earth, or would they seek peace? His words hung heavy in the air and no one could answer. Fear and doubt clouded every mind. Meanwhile, on the Resolute, Commander Laura Harris watched the growing storm of politics from afar. Reports from intelligence networks reached her desk daily. She read them with quiet focus, knowing the galaxy was shifting because of her ship's actions. She did not smile, nor did she celebrate. She knew this was only the beginning. The real test was still to come. Marcus Holt studied the incoming data with sharp eyes. He traced the movements of enemy fleets, watching how the Dominion tried to regroup. He saw the cracks forming in their empire. Worlds once loyal began to hesitate. Commanders delayed their orders. Fear had infected them, and Holt knew it was only a matter of time before the Dominion began to collapse from within. But he also knew desperate enemies were the most dangerous. Daniel Carter, the gunnery officer, spent his hours maintaining the weapons of the Resolute. He checked every system again and again, making sure nothing failed when the time came. His hands moved with steady purpose, but his heart carried the weight of what they had done. He remembered the faces of the young crew who cheered when the first battle was won, and he remembered the silence afterward. They all knew they had killed thousands. Victory did not erase the cost. Commander Harris gathered her crew one evening in the main briefing room. The walls were filled with maps of stars and images of destroyed fleets. She stood before them, her voice calm and clear. She reminded them why they fought. Not for conquest, not for power, but for survival. She told them humanity had been ignored and mocked for centuries, but now they had shown the galaxy they would not be dismissed again. Her words steadied the crew, giving them purpose. They knew the battles ahead would be harder, but they were ready. The Dominion, humiliated by their defeats, prepared for revenge. They called on allies, promising wealth and power to anyone who would join them. Some empires listened, fearing humanity's rise. Others hesitated, afraid of sharing the Dominion's fate. But the Dominion's leaders were desperate. They could not allow their empire to be broken by a single planet. They ordered the creation of a grand armada, larger than anything seen in centuries. On their homeworld, the Dominion rulers spoke to their people. They showed images of the Resolute, calling it a monster that threatened all life. They told their citizens Earth must be destroyed or no one would be safe. Fear spread through their people, and with fear came anger. The Dominion believed this anger would give them the strength to fight again. But whispers also spread among the oppressed worlds under Dominion control. They whispered of the human battleship, of its victory against impossible odds. They whispered of freedom. On the mining colonies, workers spoke of rebellion. On distant farms, peasants dreamed of breaking their chains. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion's grip was loosening, not from outside force alone, but from within. As the Dominion prepared their grand armada, the Resolute continued to move through space. It intercepted patrols, destroyed outposts, and spread fear wherever it went. Each battle was swift and decisive. The Dominion tried to trap it with numbers, but Marcus Holt always found a way to break free. Daniel Carter's weapons struck with deadly precision, tearing enemy ships apart before they could respond. The legend of the Resolute grew with each victory, and with it grew the fear of humanity. Far away in the chambers of other empires, debates turned into arguments. Some wanted to attack Earth before it became too strong. Others wanted to seek peace and learn from humanity's hidden strength. A few even considered alliances, hoping to share in the power of the humans. The galaxy was divided, and every decision carried risk. One night, as the Resolute drifted in the quiet of deep space, Laura Harris stood alone at the viewing window. She looked out at the endless stars, her mind heavy with the weight of command. She knew the battles were not just about ships and weapons. They were about the future of her people. Humanity was stepping into the light for the first time, and the galaxy was watching. She whispered to herself that they must be strong no matter what came. The next day, scouts reported the movements of the Dominion's Grand Armada. Thousands of ships gathered in one place, preparing to strike. The numbers were beyond belief, enough to darken the stars. Marcus Holt studied the data with a grim expression. He told Harris that this battle would decide everything. If they survived, humanity would stand as equals in the galaxy. If they failed, Earth would be destroyed. Harris listened, her face calm. She gave orders to prepare the Resolute for the greatest battle of its life. Daniel Carter checked the weapons one last time, his hands steady. The crew moved with quiet determination, each knowing what was at stake. They were ready to face whatever came. Across the galaxy, leaders watched in silence. Some prayed for Earth's fall, fearing their power. Others prayed for their victory, hoping for freedom. Everyone knew the storm was coming. The Resolute had lit a fire that could not be put out, and the galaxy would soon be consumed by its flames. The Resolute moved toward the gathering armada, its engines burning bright. The crew stood at their stations, their hearts steady. Commander Harris stood at the center of the bridge, her voice calm as she gave her final orders. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for the clash that would decide the future. And in that moment, as the stars shone cold and distant, humanity stood ready to face the greatest challenge it had ever known. The silence of the past was gone. The voice of Earth was now loud and clear, carried by the might of the Resolute. The galaxy trembled, knowing that whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same again. The Dominion's Grand Armada gathered in the darkness of space, larger than anything seen in centuries. Thousands of ships, cruisers, and destroyers floated together, their engines glowing like stars. They were armed with every weapon the Dominion had ever built, and their commanders believed this show of strength would crush the humans once and for all. They called it the greatest fleet in history, a storm no one could survive. Yet beneath their bravado was fear, because the name of one ship echoed in every corner of their empire, the Resolute. The Resolute approached slowly, its engines steady, its crew calm. To the galaxy, it looked like madness for a single ship to face such a vast armada. To Commander Laura Harris, it was simply another battle. She stood tall on the bridge, her eyes sharp, her voice steady as she gave orders. Marcus Holt studied the enemy formation, searching for weaknesses. Daniel Carter checked the weapons, his fingers moving over the controls with quiet confidence. The crew moved as one, disciplined and prepared. They knew the odds, but they also knew the strength of their ship. The Dominion hailed the Resolute, their voices loud and filled with arrogance. They demanded Earth surrender, promising that resistance would mean total destruction. Harris listened in silence. She allowed their words to echo across her bridge, then calmly ordered the channel closed. There was no need for speeches. Her answer would come through action. The battle began with a roar of engines and the flash of weapons. The Dominion fleet surged forward, firing beams of light and waves of missiles. Space itself seemed to burn as the storm of fire closed in, but the Resolute's shields held strong, glowing bright as they absorbed the fury. The ship moved with surprising grace, sliding through the barrage like a dancer among giants. Daniel Carter fired the first volley. Rail rounds shot out faster than light, tearing through enemy cruisers. Explosions lit up the void, scattering debris in every direction. The Dominion ships faltered, shocked that even their strongest vessels could fall so quickly. Harris remained calm, her orders clear. She directed the ship through the heart of the storm, striking with precision, each shot breaking the enemy's confidence. Marcus Holt saw an opportunity. The Dominion fleet was massive, but its size made it clumsy. He ordered maneuvers to draw them into tight formations where their numbers became a weakness. The Resolute weaved through them, striking from angles they could not defend. Each Dominion ship that moved to surround the human vessel only exposed itself to destruction. Holt's strategies turned the enemy's strength against them, breaking their unity piece by piece. The Dominion tried to adapt. They sent waves of smaller ships to swarm the Resolute, hoping to overwhelm it. Hundreds of fighters and corvettes charged, filling the void like a swarm of insects. But the Resolute unleashed its secondary weapons. Automated turrets spun and fired beams of light, cutting through the swarm with deadly accuracy. Missiles burst in silent flashes, tearing apart squadrons before they could reach their target. The swarm dissolved into wreckage, leaving only silence. On distant worlds, the battle was broadcasted across hidden channels. Alien leaders watched in disbelief. The greatest armada in the galaxy was being broken by one ship. Councils argued through the night, their voices filled with fear. Some demanded immediate alliances with Earth while others shouted for war, but no one could deny what they saw. Humanity had become something new, something terrifying. Back on the Resolute, the crew worked tirelessly. Sweat beaded on brows, hands moved swiftly over controls, and hearts pounded in steady rhythm. Yet no one faltered. Harris's voice kept them grounded, calm, and sure. She reminded them of their purpose. They were not fighting for conquest. They were fighting to show the galaxy that Earth could not be ignored. The Dominion Armada began to collapse. Ships scattered, some retreating, others destroyed. Commanders shouted in desperation, their voices filled with panic. The once proud fleet was now a broken mass of burning wrecks and fleeing vessels. Still, Harris pressed forward. She knew the message had to be clear. Humanity would not be silenced. As the battle raged, Marcus Holt noticed something strange. Among the fleeing ships were signals not from Dominion vessels, but from their supposed allies. Some allies had already abandoned the Dominion, refusing to sacrifice themselves against the humans. The great empire that had ruled for centuries was crumbling, not only from human firepower but from betrayal and fear within. Daniel Carter fired another volley, his hands steady, though his eyes were heavy with the weight of war. He had destroyed more ships in one day than many officers would in a lifetime. He knew each explosion carried lives, each wreckage carried stories. Yet he also knew there was no other choice. If they did not fight, Earth would be destroyed. This was survival, written in fire. The final push came when Harris ordered a strike at the heart of the Armada. The Resolute charged forward, its weapons blazing. The Dominion's command ship, massive and proud, stood in their path. It unleashed its full fury, beams and missiles pouring out in endless waves. The Resolute's shields flared bright, nearly breaking, but they held. Daniel Carter aimed the rail cannons at the command ship and fired. The shot ripped through its core, tearing the massive vessel apart. The explosion lit up the void, brighter than a star, signaling the end of the battle. Silence followed. The Dominion fleet, what remained of it, scattered in terror. Commanders fled, soldiers abandoned their posts, and the once great armada dissolved into chaos. Across the galaxy, the image of the Dominion's defeat spread like wildfire. The age of their dominance was over. A single human battleship had ended it. On the Resolute, the crew sat in silence. No one cheered. They were too tired, too aware of what they had done. Harris looked around at her officers, her face calm but her eyes heavy. She knew this victory was not the end. It was only the beginning. The galaxy would not simply accept Earth's rise. More battles would come, more enemies would gather. But for now they had shown the truth. Humanity was a force to be reckoned with. Marcus Holt studied the aftermath, noting how many ships had fled, how many had been destroyed. He saw the cracks spreading through the Dominion's empire. Rebellions would rise, alliances would fall apart. The galaxy was changing faster than anyone could control, and at the center of it all stood Earth. Daniel Carter powered down the weapons, his hands trembling slightly. He thought of home, of the people watching from far away. He hoped they understood the price of this victory. It was not just ships destroyed, but lives lost, futures broken. Yet he also knew it was necessary. Without the Resolute, Earth would have been nothing more than a memory. Harris walked to the viewing window, looking out at the stars. The wreckage of the Dominion's armada floated in silence, a graveyard in space. She whispered softly, a promise to her crew and to her people. Humanity did not seek endless war, but they would never again allow themselves to be mocked or enslaved. Their silence was over. The Resolute turned slowly, its engines burning bright. It carried the scars of battle, but it remained strong. Ahead lay more challenges, more enemies, more trials. But behind it lay the ruins of the greatest armada the galaxy had ever seen. The message was clear, written in fire and steel. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The wreckage of the Dominion's grand armada floated in silence, scattered across the stars like broken memories. Fires burned in the void. Ships once proud reduced to drifting debris. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion had been defeated so completely that their name no longer inspired fear but shame. Across the galaxy, eyes turned toward Earth. The image of the Resolute tearing through thousands of ships spread through hidden channels, broadcasted across worlds, and whispered in council chambers. Humanity was no longer invisible. They had stepped into the light and the galaxy trembled. On the Resolute, Commander Laura Harris stood on the bridge, her face calm though her heart carried the weight of the war. Around her, the crew worked quietly. Marcus Holt scanned reports marking the movements of fleeing ships. Daniel Carter checked the weapons, ensuring they were ready for whatever came next. The officers moved with discipline, but their eyes showed exhaustion. They had fought harder than anyone could imagine, yet they knew it was not over. The Dominion may have lost its armada, but it still ruled dozens of worlds. Their leaders would not surrender easily. In desperation, they turned to fear, spreading lies about humanity. They told their people that Earth was a monster, a beast hiding in the dark that would devour them all. They claimed the Resolute was only the beginning, that more ships would follow until every empire fell. The lies worked for some, but in many places the opposite happened. Instead of fearing Earth, the oppressed began to hope. On mining colonies, workers spoke of rebellion. On slave worlds, chains began to break. The story of the human battleship became a symbol of freedom. People who had been crushed by the Dominion for generations whispered that the time of change had come. The Dominion tried to silence these voices with violence, but each act of cruelty only fueled the flames. The empire was crumbling, not only from without but from within. In the council halls of other empires, debates grew louder. Some leaders wanted to unite against Earth, afraid of losing their power. Others argued for peace, seeing humanity as an ally instead of an enemy. A few even suggested sending envoys to Earth, hoping to build alliances before it was too late. The galaxy was divided and no one could ignore the shift. Humanity had forced every empire to reconsider its place in the stars. Meanwhile, the Resolute patrolled the edges of Dominion space. Each movement was watched by thousands of eyes. Harris kept her crew focused, reminding them of their purpose. They were not conquerors. They were guardians of Earth, defenders of their people. Yet every battle they fought sent ripples across the galaxy, changing the balance of power. Each victory was a message. Earth could not be ignored. One day, as the Resolute moved through quiet space, a transmission came from the Galactic Council. For the first time, they asked to speak with humanity directly. The message was filled with formality and fear. They requested that Harris attend a meeting, promising safe passage. The crew listened in silence as the words echoed across the bridge. Marcus Holt's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Daniel Carter shook his head, muttering that it was a trap. But Harris only stood calm, her expression steady. She said the invitation was not a trap. It was proof. The galaxy was finally ready to admit Earth had power. The journey to the council world was tense. The Resolute moved slowly, watched by fleets from every empire. No one dared to fire, though weapons were primed. When the ship arrived, it did not dock in silence. Billions watched as the battleship entered orbit, its shadow covering cities below. To the galaxy, it was a reminder of what had happened to the Dominion. To Earth, it was the first step toward something greater. Harris walked into the council chamber alone, leaving her crew behind. The hall was massive, filled with representatives from every empire. The Eldari sat in their silver robes. The Thalos Union ambassador spoke with fire in his eyes, and even Dominion survivors glared with anger. Harris moved through them calmly, her uniform plain but her presence powerful. Every step echoed, a reminder that humanity no longer walked in the shadows. The council began with noise, shouts, accusations, demands. Some cried that Earth was too dangerous, that the humans must be stopped before they conquered the stars. Others argued that Earth was the only balance against centuries of tyranny. Harris listened in silence. When her turn came, she spoke with a voice clear and steady. She said humanity did not seek to rule the galaxy. They did not seek endless war. But if attacked, they would defend themselves with all their strength. She said peace was possible, but only if respect was given. Her words spread across the chamber and the noise faded. For the first time, the council listened. They saw not just a commander, but a symbol of a people who had been silent too long. They saw the truth in her eyes, the calm power of someone who knew both weakness and strength. And though many still feared her, they could not dismiss her. Back on the Resolute, the crew waited anxiously. Hours passed before Harris returned. When she stepped onto the bridge, her expression was the same as always, calm and steady. She told them the council had heard her words, but the future was still uncertain. Some would choose peace, others war. What mattered was that humanity now had a voice, one the galaxy could not ignore. Days turned into weeks, and the changes spread. The Dominion's empire collapsed piece by piece. Worlds broke free, rebellions rose, and chains shattered. The once mighty rulers could not hold their power, their fleets scattered and their people defiant. And everywhere the name of Earth carried weight. To some it was a name of fear. To others it was a name of hope. On Earth itself, people watched the stars with pride. Families spoke of the Resolute with awe. Children dreamed of becoming part of the fleet. Elders who once feared humanity's weakness now believed in their strength. The planet that had once been dismissed as a backwater world was now the center of galactic attention. Commander Harris stood often at the viewing window of the Resolute, looking out at the endless stars. She thought of the journey that had brought them here, the silence, the battles, the victories, and the cost. She thought of the crew who had stood beside her, never faltering. She thought of Earth, small but unbroken, now standing tall among giants, and she whispered quietly that this was only the beginning. The Resolute continued its patrol, not as a conqueror but as a guardian. Its presence alone was enough to keep enemies at bay. Its shadow reminded the galaxy that humanity was awake, that their silence was over. Across the stars, stories grew. Some called the Resolute the ship of storms, others the shadow of Earth. But to those who served on it was home, a vessel carrying the weight of all humanity's history. The galaxy would never be the same again. The Dominion had fallen, the Council had listened, and Earth had risen. Fear still lingered, but so did respect. For the first time, humanity had carved its place among the stars, not by begging, not by hiding, but by standing strong. The age of silence was gone. The age of humanity had begun, and as the Resolute drifted forward, its engines glowing against the dark, every world knew the truth. When Earth's battleship arrived, the galaxy cowered in horror. But now that horror had turned into something more powerful, an understanding that humanity would never again be forgotten.